Well, thanks guys for being here. There's a lot of you, and we obviously can't unmute all of your microphones, but please feel free to use the chat feature of Zoom so that you can, encourage each other. But we don't want this just to be one-way content. We want this to be like a community, and we want it to be a conversation. So feel free throughout to dialogue with each other, to share your own points and your own thoughts as well. We will be structuring the class just like all of our other classes, where it's like a teaching block of about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll have a time for Q&A. And then after the Q&A, we'll take a short break, and we'll come back and we'll do another 20-minute block of teaching, and we'll end with more Q&A. So that's kind of the structure of the night. But really, we're talking about time management, and hopefully you guys can all see the slides here. And Brandon, I don't know, I see a yellow box around you. Does that mean you're the video person? Do you guys see me, or do you guys just see Brandon hanging out? Let us know in the chat. Might need to see me. Okay. So as long as you guys can see me, awesome. All right. So let's talk about time management. Okay, we're talking about how to be a good steward with our time, with our one precious life. And I would love just, to ask you guys, like, how do you feel you do with time management? You can even right now just take a second, between a scale of 1 to 10, type it in the chat. Let me know how you feel you do with your time management. Are you a good time manager? You get everything done each day? That would be like, you get more than enough done each day. That would be a 10. You get like some of your stuff done, but you feel like you waste a lot of time. That would be like a 3 or a 4 or a 5. Or you're just like a hot mess with your time. That would be a 1. So just type it in the chat. Let us know how you're doing, because hopefully by the end of today, you'll be a better steward of the time that God has entrusted you with. But I think all of us can relate to the feeling that there's just not enough time in the day. We have too much to do and not enough time, right? But that's actually a lie. That's a fallacy. That's not true. I have enough time in our lives to do the things that God has placed in front of us to do. He has given you enough time to do the things that he has called you to do. But I know you can relate, because I've had these thoughts before. But let me know in the chat if you can relate when you say these things. Do you ever get to the end of your day and you wonder, like, where did this day go? Like, what did I get done today? Where did the time slip away to? Or how did I get so distracted? Or maybe it's not even just the end of the day, but the end of the week. You get to the end of the week and you're like, what did I do this week? Like, did anything meaningful get accomplished this week? Did this week move me any closer to my long-term goals? And maybe some of you are watching and you're like, long-term goals, what are those? I don't have long-term goals. Well, we'll talk about that later tonight. Or, it's pretty close to the start of a new year. How many of you can say, man, I really used last year well, even though it was a pandemic, I really was able to focus and work on certain things in my life to improve who I am and what I'm called to do. Like, how many of you got to the end of last year and felt like you used the year well? Or did you get to the end of the year and say, man, I didn't use my life well. Like I'm not looking more like the person that I want to become. The truth is, how we spend our time matters. It matters so much, because seconds turn into minutes, turn into hours, turn into days, turn into weeks, into months, into years, decades, and ultimately your whole life and your legacy. And I have a phrase that I like to say, that our days determine our destiny. Our days determine our destiny, meaning your entire life is simply made up of your individual days. And so how you spend your days is how you spend your life. How we spend our time is how we spend our life. And we all want our lives to count, right? None of us wants to get to the end of our life and say, I wasted it. I wasted this one precious life that God gave me on this planet. I squandered it. I didn't do all the things that I wanted to do. Or even worse, I didn't do all the things that God had called me to do. I don't want to feel that way at the end of my life. And I know you don't want to feel that way at the end of your life. And yet it happens to millions and millions of people. They just kind of let life slip away. It sort of just passes by. They let it pass through as passive spectators, like they're not really in control. They have no purpose, no aim, no passion, no direction. Life just simply happens. But I know you, and I mean, I know most of you, and I know that you don't want that to be you. And I don't want that to be me. And that's why we're here tonight at this class, because we want to have lives of purpose. We don't want to have that kind of life that just slips away and we let it all just go to waste, right? You don't want to be that kind of person who never gives any intentional thought to the life that they want to live or what they want to accomplish or how they want their life to count for eternity. Like, you want your life to count. And so you need to make your time count. And so what we're going to do in today's class is really look more closely at the life that we want to have. Like, what is the life that you want to live? And I'm going to give you some practical tools at the end of the class to help you design your days and really determine the destiny that God has called you to. And, you might have a lot going on in your life. Like, I would say a lot going on in my life. Obviously, I work here at this church over the worship ministry and over the creative department. But I also have 2 little kids that I help homeschool. My wife and I have a photography business that I manage. I run that. I have a podcast and an online training school for worship leaders that I run that has a lot of work there. So there's a lot of balls that God has called me to juggle in this season. And by his grace, he's allowed me to learn how to juggle those things. And so I want to share some of the tactics that I've learned over the season of my life that's really busy to help you not just juggle all of your responsibilities, but to excel at them. And I just want you to know that no matter how busy you are, if God has called you to it, he will help you make a way through it. Like, if God has called you to it, he will make a way through it. And so he's going to help you. God's going to help you. The Holy Spirit is our helper. And he's going to help you be a faithful and good steward of the life that he's entrusted to you. So even before we start the class, like, you could just throw up a little prayer right now and just be like, Lord, I just ask you to help me be better steward of my time. And I promise you, God will answer that prayer, even if it's just a simple, quiet prayer in your heart right now. So we're going to be breaking up this class into 2 sections. We're going to be talking about like the theological side of time first. Then we'll stop for some questions, and then we'll go into a really practical, like, do this, use this app, or check out this thing and do these things in order to manage your time better. So it's going to be theological first, and then we'll go into the practical on the second half of the class. So I already asked you to do this, but if you want to do it again, if you weren't here for this, go ahead and rate yourself in the chat. How well do you manage your time? 10 out of 10 means you're awesome at managing your time. 1 out of 10 means you are a hot mess. And it's okay. Just confess it and get it out there. There is healing where there is confession. So let us know how you do with your time management. And then we'll get into the theological stuff here. So, all right, let's talk about time management. I wish I could see the chat. I can't see the chat. So I would love to interact with you guys here, but I'm sure whatever you rated yourself in the chat, it's probably higher than you're giving yourself credit for. So at least take heart there. But all right, let's get into this here. There are 3 things for you to consider about time, okay? So the first thing that we want to consider about time is that time is finite. Time is finite. And we intuitively know this, but time is the most precious resource that we have. You can earn more money, but you can't buy more time. You can never get more time. Every second that slips away is gone forever. You will never get it back. Use it or lose it, right? That we all know that phrase. That is the epitome of time. Use it or lose it. You don't get a second chance. There's no second go around. If you waste 2 hours on something stupid, those 2 hours are gone forever. And your life has a finite set of hours. Everybody gets 24 hours a day, and you only get a certain amount of days on this planet. You only get a certain amount of days on this planet. And in Psalm 139:16, David says this. He says, all the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. So what that means is that God has given you a predetermined set of time on this earth. God has given you a predetermined set of time on this earth, and when it's over, you're over. When it's over, I'm over. Okay. When our days run out, that's it. We're done. We don't get any more life. Okay. And so every second that ticks by is your life moving closer to its end. And I know that may seem morbid. You're like, hey, Alex, I came to this class for encouragement. That's really morbid. But the Bible actually tells us that thinking like this is the wisest way to approach our life. In Psalm 90, verse 12, it says, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Teach us to number our days, Lord, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. So we gain wisdom when we learn to number our days. When you understand that your time is limited, you will be more careful with how you invest it. And I use the word invest instead of spend. I do that intentionally, and we'll get to that a little bit later in this first section. But we want to be people who invest our days well, okay? And because when you know that your life has a definite finish line and that it's ticking ever closer every second, then you're intuitively going to be more careful with how you use or invest your time. You're going to be more careful when you realize that your time is finite. And so we'll be more purposeful. We'll design our life to be used for things that matter. We will live wisely, as that verse says in Psalms. And on the other hand, if we don't give much thought to our mortality, like if we don't think regularly about our finiteness, if we subconsciously think that this life and existence will go on and on and on in its current state forever, then we won't have any fire to motivate us. We won't feel any sense of urgency or motivation. We won't be careful with how we spend our time. You know, it's no secret that millions of Americans spend hours and hours and hours every evening in front of the television. Like, I personally have two close family members who have literally spent thousands and thousands, probably in the tens of thousands of hours of their lives in front of the television, watching sports, watching reality TV shows, watching Netflix, or whatever else advertisers would send to them, right? Thousands of hours of their life is gone forever, never to come back, like never to come back. And that is not spending time well. That is wasting time, right? Those hours, those thousands and thousands of hours could have been spent in so many more positive ways, strengthening family relationships, making special memories, contributing positively to society, creating art, helping others, serving at church, earning money, mentoring the next generation, right? All of those things could be done with those hours, but instead, those hours were wasted in front of a TV with literally nothing to show for them. But our time is finite. And so every second that slips away or is mindlessly wasted is gone forever. And I want that, in a sense, to bother you a little bit, because it should bother you that our time, once it's gone, and you'll never get that chance back to use that time better. It definitely bothers me, and I hope it kind of bothers you. I don't want to cause too much discomfort, but it makes me want to be more intentional with my time. So that's the first thing about time, is that it's finite. And be like David and say, Lord, teach me to number my days that I may gain a heart of wisdom. The second thing we learn about time is that time is precious. Time is precious. And that's the second thing. It's precious because it's finite. And when there's scarcity, there's value. So time is very scarce. So time is very valuable. Your time on this planet is valuable. Your time on this planet is a gift of God. It's a gift of God. The fact that you're here, the fact that you're breathing, the fact that you have energy in your body and breath in your lungs and a brain that works, it's a gift, right? God did not have to create you. He does not have to give you even this very second of time, this moment, this breath that he's giving you right now is a gift from God. He's choosing to give you this moment. He doesn't owe it to you. He's not obligated. He doesn't have to. He's choosing. God is choosing to give you this moment of time right now. And in Revelation 4:11, it says, Worthy are you, O Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power. For you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created. By your will they existed and were created. By the will of God, you exist and you were created. This very moment, this very second, your and my existence is a sheer gift of God's goodness and his kindness towards us. He's giving you this time. And hopefully we respond to that goodness and kindness, wanting to glorify him with the time that he's given to us. Like we want to give it back to him and say, thank you, God. I want to use this time wisely. I want to use this time for you, right? I don't want to squander this time. I don't want to waste this time. I don't want to just, be frivolous with this time. Because when something is precious, you don't want to waste it. When a precious gift is given, what do? You cherish it. You honor it. What is something that's precious to you? Think about that. I want you to, in your mind, picture something that's precious to you. Is it a family heirloom? Is it your wedding ring? Is it your children? Is it your retirement savings? Like you worked really hard to save all this money so that you can, hopefully retire one day. What's precious to you? What's something that you care a lot about? Well, now take that thing, and I want to ask you, would you dump it down the garbage disposal? Would you throw it out in the back alley? No, of course you wouldn't. Why? Because when something is precious, you're careful with it. Well, time is precious. Time is precious. Be careful with it. Time is precious. Honor it. Time is precious. Don't waste it. And I want you and I want myself to start viewing every minute as a precious, undeserved gift of God. And that will help you to be wise and not waste it. So time is finite. Time is precious. We shouldn't waste it, which we all know. So what should we be doing with the precious, limited time that we've been given? What should we be doing with it? Well, we should be investing it. We should be investing our time. Time can be invested. That's the third thing about time in our kind of theological groundwork. So what is investing? Investing is when you give something with the expectation of a positive return. You're giving this for that. You give up this for something greater later. That's the hope. That's why anybody invests in anything. They want to get a greater reward later. And Jesus taught about this principle in the parable of the talents, which we all know, Matthew chapter 25, if you want to look it up later. But I'm going to summarize it for you. But a master gives 3 different servants 3 different sums of money. And he goes away on a journey. And when he comes back, he wanted a return on what was entrusted to them. And this is what the text says. It says, the first servant came forward and says, "Look, Lord, you gave me 5 talents and I earned 5 more." And the master said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter in to the joy of your master." That's a beautiful phrase, like, well done, good and faithful servant. We all want to hear that, right? So that's the first servant. The second one says, "Lord, you gave me 2. He comes forward, and I've earned 2 more. And his master says the same thing as he says to the first. "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master." Well, we all know the story, hopefully. If you don't, you can read it later. But the third man comes forward and says, "Master, I was afraid of you, so I buried the corn. But look, here, I dug it up. I dusted it off. Here, have your 1 coin back." And what does the master say? He says, "You wicked and slothful servant. You ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming, I should have received what was mine with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast this worthless servant out into the outer darkness. In that place, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Yikes. Angry Jesus, right? Well, what is this parable telling us? What is this parable teaching us? It's teaching us that when Jesus gives you something, he's expecting a return from you. When Jesus gives you something, he's expecting a return, a positive net return from you. Well, Jesus gave you this life. He's expecting a return. Jesus gives you your days, and he's expecting a positive return on his investment in you. He's invested in you. He's given you life and breath and time and energy and wisdom and wit and your personality and everything you have at your disposal. He's given as an investment in you. And what? He's expecting a positive return from you. He's expecting something good to come out of this life that he's given you. And this is the biblical principle of stewardship. Stewardship is not just about money. Stewardship is taking something God has entrusted to you and causing it to thrive and flourish. Like, God did not give you this life just so you could squander it. No, God gave you this life to accomplish something. Ephesians 2:10 says that God gave you this life for a very specific purpose, that before he even created the world, he designed us for specific good works while we are alive on the earth. So this is what Ephesians 2:10 says. It says, for we are God's workmanship, his poema, that's the word, poema, a specifically and carefully crafted work of art. We are God's workmanship, his poema, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. So are you walking in those good works? Are you living this life on purpose? Are you accomplishing something with your time? Are you investing your time wisely? You know, when you scroll mindlessly on Instagram, or you binge a whole series on Netflix, or you get trapped in a YouTube black hole and you waste too much time watching videos, or you just spend too much time reading blogs or news, or pick your poison, right? We all have our poison, right? But you're trading that time. You're investing that time. You're trading it. And my question is, how is that investment paying off? Are you happy with the return? Is it paying dividends? Is it accomplishing anything for this life or the life to come? And so I want us all to view our time as an investment tool. View your time as an investment tool, or view your time as currency, okay? Time is currency. Time is currency. You trade it for something. Are you happy with what you're trading your time for? Are you happy with the results you're getting? So every second, every minute, every hour, you're choosing to trade it for something. And the exchange is either going to cost you, which is loss, or it's going to earn you something in return, both in this life and in the life to come. So again, I'm going to ask the question, are you investing your time well? Are you happy with the return you're getting in this life? So here's just something you can do practical this week. I want you to do an evaluation of your time. So just think about, be honest too. Just get a big blank piece of paper and write down where your time is actually going in the afternoons when you're off work, or even on your lunch break. You know, what do you do on your lunch break? What do you do when you wake up first thing in the morning? What do you do when you get home in the evening? What do you do, you know, after you lay down in bed? What are you spending those hours on? Because remember, you never get them back. And ask yourself, like, are you happy with what the return you're getting on those hours that you're investing, or those minutes that you're investing? And then ask yourself, how could you actually spend that time or invest that time more wisely? So those are the three things that we talked about. Time is finite, time is precious, and time can be invested. So that's the theological framework. Oh, there they are right there. Time is finite, time is precious, and time can be invested. So that's the theological framework we wanted to lay down before we get into all the practical things that we'll be covering later in this class. But so what we're going to do right now is we're going to have you guys submit your questions to us. Let us know what kind of questions you have about anything we've talked about here. You know, if you ask like, oh, what's a practical thing I can do? Well, I'll probably tell you, oh, I'll answer that later. But ask your questions in the chat. And while you do that, while you guys type some questions that came up during this first portion, I want to ask Brandon. Brandon, do you have anything that you would like to share just based on what we've covered tonight, or any other thoughts that come to your mind that we haven't hit on yet?
Yeah, no, I first of all, I feel like you covered this really well. It's very true that we don't have this infinite amount of time. And I think we can get so caught up in just kind of thinking stuff is going to persist. And I know we don't actively think that, but I think we live our lives that way. And so we have to be really careful to make sure that we're actually stewarding our time well, because that's ultimately what it comes back to. It's an issue of stewardship. and God has given us this precious time. And I think we really need to see that even though it's our time, he's given that to us to do what we will with it. At the same time, it really actually belongs to him. And when we give ourselves over to the Lord, we don't get to make those determinations of, well, this is what I want to do, and God just has to be okay with it. You look at the way that Paul talks in 2 Corinthians. He says that we're not our own anymore. We were bought for a price by the Lord. And so the way that we should be using our time really should be honoring to him. And so it's not even just a matter of accomplishing our goals or the things that we want to do, but it's actually accomplishing the things that the Lord would want us to do. And sometimes those can be very different things. We could be managing our time well in a worldly sense, but actually not managing it well in a spiritual or a heavenly sense, that we're actually not using it for the Lord in a very productive way. We could actually accomplish a lot in the grand scheme of things, actually accomplish very little. And so we have to be sure that we're using that time wisely for the Lord. But I think it's also important that we start with the right presupposition. We're fallen. And so we're not naturally gifted at managing our time correctly. We're actually poor stewards by nature. And so we're more geared to waste time, specifically to not do the things that the Lord would call us to do, than we are to do the things that the Lord would actually call us to do. And so it's very important that we understand that we lower our expectations of ourselves, or even just lower, our understanding of how good we actually are at these things, because we're not naturally good at these, at being pleasing to the Lord with our time. We just have to think about, like you said, the amount of time that we waste on social media or watching TV or doing really all this stuff that in the grand scheme of things doesn't really matter. They're not drawing us closer to the Lord. They're not really causing us to worship him in any greater way. And I'm not saying everything has to be this hyper productive, very utilitarian kind of mindset of like, if I'm not accomplishing something, then I can't do it. Like sometimes you could just go out and enjoy nature, go on a vacation with your family. All those things can be really important. To discipling your children, or just being out in nature can inspire you to worship the Lord, just going, wow, look at all the wonderful things that he's created for me to enjoy. That could draw you nearer to him. But I think it's important that we understand that we're not naturally good at this. And so deceiving ourselves into thinking like, oh, well, I'm excellent at managing my time all the time doesn't help us. And so we have to start from that understanding that we're naturally not going to do things that please the Lord. And we really actually have to put in effort to do that. It's not something that comes natural to us. Yeah. But I feel like you did a really good job of making sure that we understand that our time is finite. Solomon talked about that in Ecclesiastes, where he eventually just said, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. It says, eventually I'm going to die and somebody's going to profit from all of my labor. And ultimately what he tells them at the end is, fear the Lord. Like, remember your creator in the days of your youth. Fear the Lord, enjoy the life that God has given you, but use it for him, because ultimately your life belongs to him. And so I really appreciate the way that Solomon looked at this. I challenge you guys, if you want a good exercise in what Alex is talking to you, read Ecclesiastes. And it's weird because people think he's like this, he's a pessimist, but he really isn't. He's just drawing attention to a problem that we have, that we tend to not ponder our finiteness. And he causes the reader to engage with that in a very healthy way, to recognize it doesn't last forever. Your health doesn't last forever. Your resources don't last forever. All the things that we put so much value in don't last forever. And so he really encourages the reader, pour your time into things that matter. Pour your time into things that are important. You'll never get to the end of your life and wish that you hadn't discipled your kids so much, or loved your spouse so much, or done all these wonderful things for the Lord. You're never going to get to the end of your life and go like, wow, that was such a waste. You're going to be wishing you had actually probably done more of those things. And so, yeah. So I really encourage
what
you.
What you're saying really makes me think about the greatest commandment, where someone came to Jesus and said, what's the greatest commandment, Lord? And he said, love God and love people. So if you're doing those two things, you're not wasting your time, right? There are a few questions in the chat here that I love what Christine Vanderlee said. She said, to everything there is a season, and sometimes our investment is for us to rest, refresh, and recharge so that we can be good stewards. So I love that, Christine, and I agree. Like, sometimes we need to just stop working so much and just refuel and rest in the Lord so that we can be spiritually alive and not like a drained, like a shriveled potato or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Here's a question from Yvette. She says, what are some ideas on how we can spend more time with the Lord or for the Lord? Yeah. How can we spend more time for the Lord besides in the word and in prayer? Do you want to answer that or?
Yeah, I don't mind answering this one. One of the things that we actually are called to do, every person is actually called to serve the church body. And this doesn't just mean on Sundays, but this means that we're being hospitable with one another, that we're spending time with one another, that we're being involved in ministry. This is why I really don't like that term full-time ministry, because every believer is called to full-time ministry. It might not look the same. You might not be, professionally employed by a church, but we're all called to full-time ministry, which means we're all called to preach the gospel. We're all called to exhibit the character of Christ. And so one of the ways that we can be spending time for the Lord is being actively involved in the church. And this is not something that we get to weasel out of. This is something that's expected of us as believers, is to be involved and to be helping and serving one another and building one another up. Another thing that we can do is also to go on missions trips, be involved in preaching the gospel somewhere, or maybe it's being involved in places in your community where you get opportunities to preach the gospel to people. And so it's not just restricted to these little areas, though. I think those are the areas where we actually get refueled, where the Lord pours into us, where we could go be poured out. There's also part of doing things for the Lord that's actually being poured out, not just being poured into. So that's my take on it. Alex, anything you want to add?
Yeah, Yvette, thank you for the question. I think that we have to look at our relationship with God as being something that's just constant. So like, as I'm sitting here trying to teach a lesson, I'm praying and like, Lord, help me and help me to serve these people. And, so it doesn't have to be just when you're sitting at a table with the Bible open or praying. I've been going on a lot of prayer walks recently and just like walking out around the block or in a beautiful park and praying and talking to God or singing songs, as I'm talking to him. But just really inviting him into every moment of your life, because there's a book by, I think he was like a monk or something, Brother Lawrence. It's called Practicing the Presence of God. And as he's washing dishes, he's like just telling God how much he loves him and he's communing with the Lord as he washes dishes and does his kitchen duties, right? And I think we have to look at our relationship with God as like we have access at all times, because we do. And so just taking advantage of that, coming constantly before the Lord in prayer, as inviting him into every opportunity, if we're serving our spouse or if we're even in disciplining our kids, like even things that are unpleasant, if you invite the Lord into it and do it with your mind, like, and your spiritual ear towards him, it can be this communion and this act of worship kind of in all of your life. So that would be how I would answer that question.
Yeah. Amen. All right. So we got another one. The question is, how do we effectively reduce our screen time and help our spouse and children to do this as well?
Yeah, I'm actually going to cover that quite in depth in the second half. So I'm going to hold off on that one. So please forgive me, Daphne, for pushing it off, but we will get to it and it will be very in depth. So we'll do that later.
And then the next question we have is, God is first in my life, but I am so inconsistent with time management. Are there scriptures that I can meditate on to be more consistent?
Yeah. I mean, I really think Psalm 90, like I said, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. So so I know this is really morbid, but I've been walking through a cemetery like 4 or 5 days a week for my prayer walks. And, you look at these tombstones and you're just like, man, nobody even remembers these people. What do I want my life to be about? Like, what do I want my life to count for when I'm in that, crypt? Like, what do I want people to remember about me when I'm on a tombstone? The only thing that people see is my name and 2 dates, right? That's like keeping that in your mind. So again, that's Psalm 90 verse 2. That would be probably the main one I would go meditate on. But I think one helpful exercise is just to think, what do I want people to say at my funeral? And I've actually thought about that. And I want them to say this. I want them to say, Alex, encouraged me to follow Jesus and to love Jesus more. That like, if every person at my funeral stands up and says those two things, like I will have lived a good life, you know?
Yeah.
So how would you answer that? Any scriptures come to mind for meditating on not wasting your time?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, what I would encourage you to do is to read through the book of Ecclesiastes, because he just covers that whole topic from beginning to end. I think it's 12 or 13 chapters of that book are dedicated to exploring the finality of life and really stewarding our time well. And it's really interesting because it comes from a perspective of somebody who had everything. I don't know how much you know about Solomon, but I mean, he had everything he could possibly want. I mean, he had the wealth, he had the stuff, he had the places to live, he had the power. I mean, he had everything that every last person on this earth strives for. And he came to the knowledge that he just was not fulfilled in any of it, in and of itself, that apart from the Lord, none of those things satisfied him. And so he makes some really good assessments as to what really matters in life. And it has a way of, if we really let it, if we feel the weight of our own mortality, it has a way of really transforming the way that we live our lives. And we realize, man, I could actually wake up tomorrow and not make it through the day, or I might not even wake up at all. Like my life could end tonight. And so it's like, you know, and I know people don't really like going through that. I think we've tried to sanitize death a little bit too much in my humble opinion. But I think when we ponder our mortality, it does a lot of good for us to really manage our time and steward our time well, because we realize, like you said, Alex, we don't have a lot of it. And so I really encourage you to do just read through Ecclesiastes a couple of times. I think you could read through the whole book in like a half hour or something like that. It really doesn't take long, but I think you'll find a lot of what you're looking for. I think it'll really challenge you on a rather existential level. You'll have a little bit of a crisis, I think, by the time you're finished with it, but I think it'll produce a lot of good.
Yeah, that's good.
A lot of good change.
And Andrew put James 4:14 in the chat, so check that out, guys, as well.
Yeah.
So let's see. I saw a really good question here. How do you determine when the time you are spending is being wasted and when is it being used well? How can you check in with yourself to become more self-aware? Well, I'll answer that, Jessica. And then Brandon, you can kick in. But yeah, I mean, if you want to become more self-aware of how you're spending your time, there are actually, you can track your time just honestly with a piece of paper. Like every 15 minutes, you write down how you spent the last 15 minutes. You do that for 1 week. It's kind of a tedious exercise, but it does help you be honest about like, wow, like that's what I was doing for the last 2 hours, you know? Or there's time tracking apps like we're going to talk about later tonight in the lesson, that it's called Clockify. It's free. And you can put it on your phone, and just when you start a new project, like doing laundry, you just hit doing laundry and it tracks that. And when you're done, you start the next thing, making lunch. And then you can see, you know, so there are things, Jessica, that we know are not a waste of time. I mean, honestly, anything God has called you to, like any responsibility he's entrusted you with, whether, I don't know if you're a parent or if you're a student or if you're you work a job, but anything that he's put in front of you, to obviously serving in church, that could be one thing, but anything that God has entrusted to you, if you're doing those things, you're not wasting time, right? So I always tell people, when people say, what is God's will for my life? I always tell them, the things that are in front of you today to do are God's will for your life. That is God's will for your life today. Do those things well, steward those things well, be excellent in those things, bring your best energy and effort to those things. And then tomorrow he'll open a new set of responsibilities and you do those things well, right? So I think that's a really healthy way to approach, like, you know, what is God's will for my life? Because that's another question that I see here. But also like what is a waste of time? Well, if it's a responsibility that is in your sphere of influence that God has given to you, doing those things aren't a waste of time. Obviously, preparing your lunch is not a waste of time, and cleaning your house is not a waste of time, and doing your laundry is not a waste of time. Like those are just things that we have to do to live. I think we all know when we're wasting time, right? Like it's like, and I'm not saying we shouldn't ever watch Netflix, or we should never watch, you know, a documentary, or we should never, you know, read the news, but is it consuming? Like, is it your default? Are you going to it? And we're going to talk later tonight about destroying your distractions. But, you know, I think we all know when we're wasting time. And if I'm not being very clear, Jessica, I'm sorry. You can write in the chat to try to maybe get us to help answer your question more. But
Yeah.
Brandon, how would you answer that? How do we know when we're actually wasting time?
Yeah. So I think this might not be the answer that you want, but it's going to take diligent study of the Bible. Because realistically, the way that we're going to understand more and more how we're wasting our time, and this is something that we grow in. It's not just something that, I could just impart like a few facts to you and all of a sudden you'll just be perfect at not wasting your time. It's something that we all grow in. Like I said, we're fallen creatures. And so the more that we understand what the word says, the more we learn what's important to the Lord. And the more that we know what's important to him, the more we know what to be engaged in and what he actually considers a waste of time and what isn't a waste of time. Kind of like I said, I think there are some things that are pretty obvious where it's like, if we're taking care of our bodies, or we're obviously like going to church or reading our Bibles, like those things obviously are not going to be a waste of time. But some things that are instantaneously a waste of time, like just one that comes to mind, sin is always a waste of time. It's never a good use of your time ever for any reason, just period. So if it's sin, automatically you're not using your time well. But I think more than anything, it's going to take diligent study of the word. The more that you understand what the word says, the more you know how to use your time, the more that you learn what the Lord cares about. So I would encourage you to just continue to read your Bible and to know what God actually wants you to do. I think far too often we over spiritualize, like, well, what is God's calling on my life? Well, he gave you a book to telling you what to do. So first of all, it'd be read the scriptures. And then the second part is, how can you check in with yourself to become more self-aware? This one I can speak to a little bit because I have a problem of hyper focusing. I can get engaged in something and hours can disappear very quickly. Especially if it's something that I'm really engaged in. So I would encourage you. One thing that helps me is setting timers. If I know that I have something to do in an hour, I'll set, a time, like a timer for like 55 minutes or 45 minutes. That way, like something goes off that kind of snaps me out of whatever I'm doing. I've also found using like a digital calendar really helps, where I get reminders in order to, to know what I have coming up. So that way it's like, hey, by the way, don't forget 15 minutes, you have a meeting, like you need to go, things like that. So I found that stuff that kind of is outside of me a little bit tends to help. If I'm just, kind of sitting there going like, okay, I need to make sure I don't forget, that doesn't always really help me. And so I have to kind of let some other things be my brain a little bit, which I'm sure Alex will talk about later. So I won't dig into that too much, but those would be a few suggestions that I would have for that question.
Yeah. And one last thought, if, and this maybe sounds hyper spiritual, but like, if it doesn't count for eternity, like if it doesn't strengthen your relationship with God or serve somebody else, or if it's not a good, if you get to the end of it and you're like, that was not good stewardship, I was not a good steward of that moment, then it's a waste of time. Right.
Yeah.
So let's answer one last question, and then we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back for the practical application of like, how do we manage our time? Like, what are some tools and techniques we can use? But the question is something about college. Let's see. Oh yeah. Angel says, what are some ways that college students can be more active in church without it affecting their studies? Brandon?
Yeah, so I think this is a really good question. I think one thing I'd first say is that while you're in college, like that's part of where God has you. And so I think it's okay to not be able to be as active in your local church. Now, please don't take that as me saying that you don't have to go to church anymore because you're in college. That's not what I'm saying. But I think we all have restrictions. We all have things that might be consuming our time in different ways. And part of the way that you can serve the Lord is actually by being a good, diligent student, that maybe even your professors would see that like, wow, this one Christian student that I've got seems to be the most diligent out of the bunch. Like that glorifies the Lord. So I would first encourage you with that. But I think the big thing is just scheduling out your time, knowing what you can commit to, what you can't, but also being very real about what you actually have to do and what you don't. So I would encourage you to write down all the things that you have to do, figure out where the holes are in your week. Like maybe there's a ministry that you can go join. Like maybe you find out, oh man, Tuesdays, I've got nothing going on. That's a perfect day for me to do something. So maybe you check at the church and go like, hey, what's going on Tuesdays that I can maybe get involved in, or maybe you find you have the weekends free. Hey, maybe there's some outreaches I could go on or something like that. So I think first you have to kind of figure out what your actual schedule looks like before you can really start answering that question. I think once you write down like, okay, I got class on these days, I've got my part-time job on these days, I have this reoccurring family thing, every second, Saturday or whatever. Then once you put those things into a calendar, you can really look at it and go like, okay, I think I know where I can fit some stuff in. I found visualizing it really helps me a lot. And I can just look at it like, get a monthly calendar and just start writing in everything that you have to do that's reoccurring. Don't worry so much about like the little things like, I don't know, I can't think of anything at the moment, but maybe it's something that's not consistent. I think that's more what I'm looking for, that it's not really something that reoccurs or it doesn't happen regularly, but all the regular stuff, like, you have classes on these days, you always have a meeting on this day of the week. You always know that you see your parents or whatever every first Saturday of the month. Like, write all that stuff in, and then I think it'll give you a good idea of what your time actually looks like.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Angel,
a little long-winded.
No, it's okay. I think Brandon is right on the money. Like, where God has you right now is where he wants you, and use and steward that opportunity of being a good student, of being a kind, godly example to your friends around you at class. That is your act of worship, and that is your ministry right now in this season. And like Brandon said, and we'll talk about in just a minute, when you put everything on a calendar, you can see where the holes actually are, and then you can choose what to fill those holes with. And maybe one of those choices will be serving in the church. So with that, we're going to take a break. If that's okay with you guys, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll be back at 8 exactly for the practical tips of how to do this well. All right. So I'm going to share the screen so you can just see this one big slide.
Yep.
And we'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay. So, all right. Well, we're going to get into some practical tips now on time management. And so we talked already the theological or philosophical groundwork of time is finite, time is precious, and time can be invested. But now we're going to really flesh out what does it mean to use our time well, but how do we use our time well? Because if you're like me, you want your life to count for something. You want to be a good steward, and you want to use your time wisely. And if you see on the screen, I hope everyone can see the screen, in Ephesians 5, verses 15 through 17, Paul says, look carefully how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. Now, notice there are 3 things Paul is telling us to do in this passage. He's telling us, be careful how we walk. He's telling us to understand the will of the Lord. And he's telling us to make the best use of our time. Now, if we were to rephrase it into something catchy and memorable, it's never a good idea to rephrase the word of God because it's perfect in all its ways. But if you were going to rephrase these concepts, you could do so like this. You could say, Paul is telling us to determine our destiny, and I'm going to explain what these things mean and how they actually correlate with the verse, but determine your destiny, design your days, and destroy your distractions. If you want to use your life wisely, you need to determine your destiny, design your days, and destroy your distractions. Now, you might be saying, Alex, where are you getting this from the verse? Well, let me show you. So determine your destiny would be to understand what the will of the Lord is. Like, what does God want you to do with your life? What is his will for you? Determine your destiny. The second phrase that corresponds with the verse is design your days, which is be careful how you walk, meaning is each step planned? Is each step planned? How are you allocating your time? Are you designing your days? And then the last thing, destroy your distractions, is make the best use of the time, meaning don't let things keep you from doing what God wants you to do. Okay, destroy your distractions. So we're going to talk about each one of these things in turn, and this is going to be very practical. So if you want to take notes, pen and paper, or your digital note-taking app, this is definitely going to be stuff that you can actually apply this week and live out. So the first thing we're going to talk about is determining your destiny. Determine your destiny. That's the very, very first step you need to take. Understand the will of the Lord. Because if you don't know what you want to accomplish with your life, then there's no way to know what the proper use of your time should actually be. In other words, you can only know how to spend your time once you've defined your desired outcome. You won't know if you're wasting time or if you're spending it wisely until you know where you're trying to go. Okay, so that's the very first thing you need to do, is to envision the desired outcome of your life. And then you'll know what you need to do to actually get there. So once you know what you want or what the Lord wants, you can reverse engineer your way to achieving those outcomes. So you'll populate your calendar with the activities that will actually help you achieve your desired outcome. So that's your first practical step. You need to spend some time this week asking and answering the question, what do you want your life to look like? And I want you guys to set some time aside this week to do that. I want you to find a spot on your calendar and put that in there. Say, I'm going to spend some time reflecting this week on what do I want my life to look like? What do you want to actually accomplish in your life? What do you want to accomplish this year for your life and for the Lord? Okay, so spend some time this week reflecting on that. And I want you to get very specific. What do you want your health to look like? What do you want for your family life? What do you want for your spiritual life? What do you want for your vocation, for your education, etc.? I believe, it's my conviction, that within the bounds of Scripture and within the guidelines of God's moral standards, that he gives us freedom to choose the things that we want to do, the things that we're passionate about, the things that we feel excited about. I believe God gives us some freedom to pursue those things. And so what do you want to do for yourself, for your family, for your church, and for the Lord? You know, I went on vacation last October, and I had a beautiful view where we were staying. And I just sat there and I asked myself, what do I want? Like, what do I want from my life? What do I want my life to be about in this season? And I made this list, and I'm sharing it with you just as an idea, like as a way for you to get ideas for yourself. So here's what I wrote down when I was sitting there looking at this beautiful view and reflecting, like, what do I want for my life? Well, I want a healthy, happy, warm, high communication marriage. Okay, that's one. I want kids that love me and feel positive and joyful in my relationship with them, and that are biblically and emotionally prepared for life. I want to be a man of wisdom and integrity, grounded in who God made me to be, and letting my life flow out of a strong, centered foundation in Christ. I want that, okay? I want to be constantly growing and learning. I want to be physically healthy. I want to be financially secure and generous. I want to be relationally invested into other young ministry leaders. And I want to have a family ministry, something that my family does together to serve the Lord. And then lastly, I want to be different from the rest of the world. Now, I know what all of those specifically mean. When I say those things, I know in my head, I can picture it in my head. But this isn't about me. This is about you. So what do you want from life? What do you want to grow in this year? What do you want for your financial life, for your family life, for your educational life? I want you guys to get very specific about the life that you want to have for the Lord, because God has given you one life and he's calling you to steward it well. And that's your first step. Determine your destiny. And again, the reason it's your first step is because once you know what you want to do, you can break down each of these goals into individual actions. So you can't just hope that these things are going to happen. You actually have to break them down into specific actions or habits that will help make each one of these things a reality, right? You can't just hope it's going to happen just because you wrote it down. Although they do say writing your goals down makes them more likely to happen, strangely. But without daily or weekly or regular actions, these things are just words on paper. They will not happen. I have to work to make them happen. With God's help, yes. Trusting God to lead me, to guide me, yes. Man makes his plans, but the Lord directs his steps, yes. But I still have to step. I still have to do something. So once you have this list of what you want your life to look like, then you need to start breaking each one of these down into tangible actions that will actually help you move towards these goals. So I'm going to give you an example of how the first point what would I need to do in order to have a healthy, happy, warm, high communication marriage? What would I have to do? Okay, that's just one, but let's break it down. I would need to do some of these things. I would need to probably have some sort of daily 30-minute conversation time with my wife, getting to catch up, see how she's doing, see what's on her heart. I would probably need to do some sort of yearly weekend getaway, just us without the kids. I definitely need to do some sort of daily caring, kind gesture towards my wife. We should weekly be resting and spending time enjoying each other, a monthly date night out without kids, and then prayer and scripture regularly together. I think if I did those things on a regular basis, I would have a healthy, happy, warm, high communication marriage. So these are the broken down action steps that are going to get me to this goal. And you need to figure out what you need to do for each one of your goals and make sure that those things make it onto your calendar. You break your big goals into small actions and habits that make it into your daily and weekly routine, and that will lead you to your big goal. Recently I've been thinking, and this isn't in my notes, so I'm going to go off on a little side tangent, but recently I've been thinking that it's not the mountaintop experiences that change us, it's the mundane. It's not, our life isn't changed in one fell swoop. It's the daily, weekly consistency of doing the right thing over and over and over and over again. That's what brings results. That's what brings success. That's what brings change. There's a phrase, a long obedience in the same direction. It's just doing the right thing over and over and over. And we all know that verse that says, don't grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time you will reap a harvest of righteousness if you do not give up. So just break your big goals. First, you got to have the goals. That's design. That's the determine your destiny or understand the will of the Lord. Have the goals, but then break them down into small actionable habits and move forward on them. And so that's what you'll do for determining your destiny. Okay. And you can do that this week. It's not like you have to spend 3 months praying about these things. You can set aside some time to be with the Lord and say, Lord, what do you want for my life? What do I want to do in this season? What am I feeling called to? And write those things down and be specific. Determine your destiny. That's the first thing. The second thing you do after that is now you need to design your days. Design your days. Now that you know what you need to do to get to your goals, you need to design your day to fit those actions and habits into your calendar. So you design your days, you use your hours with your long-term goals in mind. Otherwise, you will not get to your goals. And I heard somebody say this, and I was like, this is amazing. So basically, you plan your work, you work the plan, and the plan will work. Plan your work the plan, and the plan will work. I love that. So the actions and habits that will move you towards your goal need to make it into your calendar, or the goals will never get accomplished. And I said this phrase in the beginning, that your days determine your destiny, meaning your life is just the sum total of all the ways you've spent your days. That's what your life is going to turn out to be. How are you spending your days? Or another way to say it would be, your actions today will determine your destination tomorrow. Your actions today will determine your destination tomorrow. What you do each day matters. It will either get you closer to the person you want to be, or it won't. And so ask yourself and be honest. Be honest with the answer. Are the things on your calendar getting you closer to the kind of person you want to become for the Lord? And you might say, Alex, I don't have anything on my calendar. And maybe you're right. Maybe there's nothing on your actual calendar, but your days are still filled with something. Your time is being spent somewhere. So even if it's not on a physical calendar or a digital calendar, you're actually spending that time. Is what is filling your days getting closer to the life that you want to have and the life that you want to live for God? So design your calendar and you will design the fruit of your life. And again, I said, your life is simply the sum of your calendar events and routines. So what you repeatedly do, your habits will bear out on the fruit of your future. And if you think about it that way, honestly, you can design your calendar to accomplish pretty much anything you want. Like with the right routines and habits, you could write a book. You could become extremely physically fit, like Arnold Schwarzenegger. You could have an incredibly healthy marriage. You could raise kids that are prepared to face the world. So remember, one of my goals was to have kids that are emotionally and spiritually prepared to face the world. So if that's one of my goals, I actually have to get something on my calendar that's going to move that towards the needle. So move the needle towards that. So what I did is every Saturday I bought 3 books on like kids apologetics, like helping them understand how, God there is a true creator and we didn't evolve from slime. And so all these questions that they're going to be bombarded with in college. So now every Saturday I spend an hour training them with the answers to those questions so that when they do go off to college, they aren't pummeled. So I had to get that onto my calendar. So what needs to go onto your calendar to get you to your goals? That's the question that I want you to ask. Whatever you want to accomplish, put it on your calendar to get you there. Design your days, build your plan, and follow your plan. Now, I have 6 tips for designing your day. The first, I'm going to go one at a time. There's number 1 is to time block or map out your ideal week. And I'm going to show you what this looks like in just a second. But basically using a Google Calendar or a paper spreadsheet or even a digital spreadsheet, you can design your ideal week. And you basically asking the question, if I could design my ideal week hour by hour, what would I put on my calendar? How would I design my life to bring about the desired results? And the good thing about having an ideal calendar there is that, this is what the ideal calendar looks like, by the way, if you want to see it. That's my ideal calendar. Okay. The good thing about having an ideal calendar there is you can compare your real life calendar to your ideal calendar and be like, wow, I'm completely off track. The things I'm spending my time with are not actually going to move me to the life that I want to have. So you use your ideal calendar to compare and see how you're doing, and then you make adjustments. So that's the first thing about designing your week. The second thing about designing your week or designing your day is to put your boulders in first. What are boulders? Boulders are the important things, the most important things, the priorities. Those go on your calendar first. Time with God. Yes, first. Put that on your calendar first. Time with family, exercise, caring for your body that God gave you, major work responsibilities. Okay, those are your primary boulders. You need to make sure that your calendar gets filled with those things first. And you've probably heard the analogy, if you fill a jar with sand, you have no room for the rocks. Okay, so you need to put the big rocks, the important things in first. Then you can fill around the big rocks with the medium pebbles, and then you can fill in the cracks with the sand. And the sand is the leftover stuff, the non-important stuff, like, I don't know, coffee with an acquaintance, or spending an hour reading the news, or watching a Netflix thing. That's the last thing that should go on your calendar, not the first thing. So as you're designing your week, put your big priorities first. The third thing is starting to say no. Okay, so if you really want to be intentional with your life, you have to start to say no to things that aren't going to move you to your desired destiny. And you can't be legalistic about it, but like, for example, if I have I have a worship ministry that I am responsible for. I have staff that I'm responsible for. I have a wife and 2 kids that I'm responsible for. I have a side business with my wife that I'm responsible for. All of those things take time. And if I can't say no to people who want to invade those callings that God has given me, if I don't say no to these things that God hasn't entrusted to me, and then they start to crowd in and take away from the things that God has entrusted to me, then I'm being a bad steward. So saying no is not a bad thing. Saying no is actually protecting the things that God has called you to. Saying no says, no, I can't do that because God called me to this. So don't be afraid to start to say no. You can learn to say no nicely. You don't have to be mean. You don't have to be a jerk. You can say no nicely. But you can't say yes to everything. You have to guard your best yes. You have to guard your best yes. So don't say yes to everyone who wants you to come to their event, everyone who wants you to come to their graduation, everyone who wants you to do this, do that, come to this thing. It's like, no, what does God ask you to do? Focus on those things. If you have time, sure, that's the sand. Fill in the rest. But say no if you have to say no to guard what God has called you to. All right. And then the fourth tip is to theme your days, thematically batch your days, which means to schedule similar or related tasks together. So for example, for me, on Mondays, I do all my service prep work. So I pick the songs, I send the band the notes that they need to know. I print the chord charts, I make the computer stuff that we use. All of Monday is dedicated to services. All of Tuesday is content creation day. So it's like preparing for this class that I'm teaching and doing my PowerPoint, or doing a worship training podcast that I do. That would be a Tuesday. So those days are all thematically batched together. Now it's not always possible to do that, but if you can, because what it does is it keeps your mind in the same headspace. Like today I'm doing this, and it keeps all the related tasks around that on your mind. And so you're more focused. So thematically batch your days. It's not always possible, but it's helpful. The fifth thing to do when designing your day is to be aware of your energy level throughout the day and schedule your tasks accordingly. Now, I never thought about this before, but it has been a game changer for me. Like when you try to work, when your brain is like in the foggy brain space, you're not doing good work. It's taking you 4 times longer, and the result that comes out is bad. So it's better to plan your important tasks in your highest energy zone. So like I said, this is newer for me in the last 2 years I've been doing it, but you basically keep track of like, when do you feel focused? When do you feel energetic? When is your brain sharp? You start to pay attention to that throughout the week. So for me, it's from 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. And then you also pay attention, when do you feel sluggish? When do you have brain fog? And you start to notice that. And then you just realize, so for me, it's 2:30 p.m. to like 3:30 p.m. I have brain fog and I get real sluggish. So what I want to do is I want to plan my most important activities when my brain is sharp in that 10:30 to 2:30 window. And I want to avoid important activities and do the brain dead work, like answering emails or going for a run, in my low energy zone. That's just like a little thing. It's going to make you do better work faster with better results. So that's really cool, is to be aware of your energy. And then the last tip I have for designing your day is to schedule reoccurring tasks. Now, please, if you have questions about all this, write them down. And then, or you can put them in the chat now, or you can just wait until we get to the Q&A section, because I know I'm going fast and there's probably a lot of unanswered questions in your mind, but just get ready. We'll be doing Q&A in a minute. But the last thing is to use reoccurring tasks when you design your week, because a lot of your day, you don't need to design from scratch each day. Like a lot of our life is a routine, and you have to do the same things on the same days. And so you can use a reoccurring task on your task app, or a reoccurring calendar on your digital calendar, to remind you to do the things that you know you need to do, but you often forget. Things like take out the trash every Monday night, pay the rent on the, whatever, first day of the month, change the oil in the cars every 3 months, do something extra caring for your spouse once a week. Like, put those things on a repeat thing and just let your calendar tell you what to do. So that's the tips for designing your day. So we've determined our destiny, we've designed our day, and we're going to get to destroy our distractions in just a minute. But I want to just show you what a nicely designed week can look like, both digital format and paper format. So here's a digital version of my ideal week. If I want to have the life that I need to have, if I want to have a strong relationship with the Lord, if I want to be physically healthy, if I want to make sure all my responsibilities are hitting on the right times, this is what my week would look like. Okay, this is what my week would look like. Does it always look like this? No, it's an ideal week, but it gives you just a pattern to model a good week after. So dinner with my family, I try to do that these 3 days when I'm not at service on Thursday nights. And Free Friday is our Sabbath right here. I don't know if you can even see my mouse. I'm probably just like showing you things that you can't see. But anyway, so that's a digital version. A paper version would look like this. This is my paper planner that I use. I love it. I'll tell you about it in a little bit. But here's kind of an ideal week for me. And you see the orange is that's my high energy time frame. So I try to plan my most important work in that spot. And then in the pink zone, that's my brain sluggish. So what do? I try to do exercise there, or I try to do worship or like admin work there. Okay. So that is the ideal life all mapped out. So let's get not ideal and let's go into real life. So great, Alex. I have my ideal calendar, and I would encourage you to do that this week too sometime. But now let's talk about real life. How do you plan out your week and your day? Well, I'm just going to tell you how I do it. So, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it because I'm going to hold up this planner here, but if you can make me bigger. But here's how I personally plan out my week and my days. So every Sunday night at like, I don't know, 5 or 6 or sometimes 7, whenever like dinner's over and the kids are kind of like occupied with something, at 7 p.m., I will sit down at a table with this book. This is called Michael Hyatt's Full Focus Planner. I really like it. It's been really helpful to me. And what I do is I look ahead at my week and I plan out my entire week, not in detail, but the big things that I need to do that week. And I plan it out day by day, and I'll show you in just a second. But this is what I do. I sit down with this book. I look at my calendar. So what's on my calendar? And I use my calendar for like meetings or anything that's time sensitive. Take my daughter to the orthodontist. So on Friday at 3 p.m., I got to take my daughter to the orthodontist. Okay. Anything that's actually time sensitive or is a time block, that's what I put on my calendar. So I get out my calendar and I look at my calendar and I put those things into my week on the appropriate days. Then I look at my to-do list. I use an app called TickTick. And I like TickTick because it also shows my calendar events, not just my tasks. So check it out. It's free, TickTick. But yeah, if you don't want to use an app, you can do paper too. But so I look at my calendar and I look at my tasks and I plan out my week day by day. And I write down, let me show you. I don't know if you can see this. Hopefully you can see this. I guess I could stop sharing for a second. Let me stop sharing for a second. So I don't know. Can you see this sort of? So was that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Okay. So that's my week. I don't know if you can see that. I can't even see it, but I sit down, I look at my calendar and my to-do list, and I look at any big goals or projects that I have in that week. And I put it on my calendar, and I know I know the big things I need to do on Monday. I know the big things I need to do on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Okay. Then I have my week planned out. And the nice thing about having your week planned out is that you are being proactive, not reactive. You're going into each day knowing what you need to do and why it matters. And that's so important because so many people in this world are reactive. They don't have a plan. They're just like letting life happen to them. But you know what God has called you to do. So you want to go on the offensive. You want to be proactive. So sit down, you plan out your week. And then after you plan out your week, each night, this is what I do. I go to bed, I wake up, I do my devos, and then I plan out my day after devos. So let's say it's Monday at 6 a.m. I'm done with my devos at 6:45. And now I take out my planner. I look at the week view. I look at Monday. What are the big things I needed to do on Monday? And I write it on the day page, which for my planner, it looks like this. Let me stop my screen share. I hope this is helpful and not boring. I hope you guys aren't like dying right now. So here's Monday. So you have my priorities for Monday, and then all the little stuff like, oh, I got to text so-and-so, or, oh, so that way now I have a plan for Monday and I know what I need to do to be successful on Monday. And I do that each morning for each day of the week. And then each day I'm going into my day with a plan and I'm being proactive, not reactive. So that's what it looks like. Let me see. I think I have a slide. Yeah, that's my weekly view. And here are my big priorities on the right for the week. And then I go to my daily plan after my devos each day, and I write down what was on the weekly view and any other small little things, like I need to text Naoki, the drummer, little things that come into your mind. You write it all down. So that's what I mean to plan your day, design your day. And let me just encourage some of you who are bad at remembering to do stuff. It's actually it's not hard to overcome that that tendency of, oops, I forgot. Oops, I forgot. It's simple. Get a to-do list on your phone or get a paper planner. And anytime you think of something, write it down. Write it down and put a due date on it. I need to do this. I need to text so-and-so. I need to pay this bill. You just get in the habit immediately when you think about it, you write it down. I know it sounds simple, but there are a lot of people who struggle with this. Okay. But if you write it down, it's going to do two really helpful things for you. It's going to help you not forget those things. And it's also going to allow you to not have that anxiety that you're forgetting something, because you write it down in your second brain, which is your to-do list, and you won't forget. You deal with it. And you always have to put a due date on it. Otherwise then it's just nothing. It's just a list of nothing. So anyway, that's designing your days. We're going to do one more thing because you're not done yet. You need to destroy your distractions. And somebody asked about screen time earlier, and we're going to be talking about that right now. So what I want you to do, we live in the most distracted generation ever to exist. I want you to type your biggest distraction in the chat. I thought I had a slide. I don't have a slide. What is your biggest distraction? What is your biggest time-wasting distraction? I want you to type it in the chat. Let's get it out there. Let's be honest with each other. Let's confess. I'm gonna look at what you guys write. Internet, phone, social media, phone, TV, phone, games, social media, answering emails, Netflix, social media, YouTube. Yeah, YouTube for sure. YouTube. Yeah, phone, games, social media, Facebook, scrolling, Roblox. Yep, I've heard of that. Phone. Yeah. So we all are so hyper distracted, so hyper distracted. And so I want to confess, as I was writing this lesson on time management, I was distracted by my email. I wanted to constantly check my email because writing this lesson is hard, and checking your email is easy, and it feels productive even though it's not productive. So we can all relate to how unbelievably hard it is to stay focused in today's hyper-connected society. And the truth is, guys, tech companies are all fighting for our attention. They're using psychological techniques which fragments our attention and splinters it into smaller and smaller bits. They're trying to get the seconds from you. And I don't know if you knew this, but it's clinically proven that as of 2021, the average human attention span is shorter than a goldfish. Okay, my attention span is shorter than a goldfish. Humans, 9 seconds, goldfish, 12 seconds. Guys, goldfish beat us by 25%. That is not a good sign for the human race, okay? And our smartphones are wonderful at making us stupider, right? We need to work hard to focus. And sociologists and business analysts are saying that the ability to focus will be the key attribute that will set successful people apart from the rest. But it's not just about being successful. It's not about that. It's actually about achieving the things that God has called you to do. It's about that, right? If you want to be who God has called you to be, and if you want to do what God has called you to do, you need to destroy your distractions. Distractions are the things that keep you, or they take you off course from achieving your desired destiny. So I want you to think about the word distraction. Distraction. So the root word is traction. Traction, like the thing that keeps the tire on the ground moving in the direction of momentum. So distraction means it's something that's taking away your traction from moving in the direction of your goals. So anytime you're distracted, you are not getting closer to the life that you believe God has called you to. So in essence, this is huge. In essence, a distraction is keeping you from the life that you want. Okay, and I want you to think about that from now on. That anytime you're tempted to be distracted, I want you to say to yourself, this thing will keep me from the life that I actually want. It's distraction away from the thing your goal, the thing you're trying to go to, okay? So in order to make the best use of our time, that's what Apostle Paul says in Ephesians 5, make the best use of your time, you must ruthlessly cut out distractions. Cut out everything that will keep you from the life that God is calling you to. And Jesus sort of used this idea when he was talking about fighting lust. he says, if you want to get into heaven, cut off your hand, gouge out your eye if you have to. If heaven is your goal, then cut out everything that will keep you from getting there. And that's the same thing we need to do with distractions. Cut it out if it's keeping you from your goal. So I'm going to give you a few ideas on how to better be less distracted. So here's two really big ones. The biggest two that I can tell you, I have 6 more later or 5 more later, is to use do not disturb on your smartphone. Your smartphone is like your number one enemy from keeping you from doing the things you know you should be doing. It's also a wonderful tool. I don't want to like demonize technology and say technology is bad. It's not. It's neutral. But the designers of the smartphone apps, they know how to hook you. Okay, there's trillions of dollars of industry trying to hook you to sell you ads. So 2 things you need to do is turn on do not disturb. Okay, do not disturb is the setting on your phone that means no notifications can come through ever. Now, you can set it up so that, you know, like your spouse will be able to call you or whatever. But by and large, you want to have nobody able to interrupt you from doing the things that you know you need to be doing. So, and if you have a smartwatch, you should turn off do not. So I have a cheap smartwatch. Everyone thinks it's an Apple Watch. It's not. It's like a $60 Chinese knockoff, but I use it for tracking my exercise. So this I never have it buzz me. It doesn't act like a smartwatch at all. So turn it off on your phone, turn it off on your smartwatch. Okay. Do not disturb is like your best friend, because every time your phone dings, it breaks your concentration. Every time your concentration is broken, you have to start all the way over to get to a state of flow, to get to the same depth of thinking that you were at before you were interrupted. Did you know Microsoft did a study on its employees? They found that when an employee was working and they were interrupted by email and they checked the email, it took them 23 minutes to get back to the state of flow and work that they were in before they were interrupted. 23 minutes wasted. So they did the work longer, it took them longer, and they did it worse because they let their phone interrupt them. So turn off all notifications on your phone. I have it off on my computer and my phone at all times. And then I get to choose when I want to go check it. I get to double tap my screen and wake it up and see if, oh, look, my daughter wrote me an email. She actually did. It says, I miss you, Daddy. So, and maybe she's watching. Oh, she is watching. Hi, honey. So, but, you know, I get to double tap my screen and see who wrote me. I don't have to let my phone interrupt me. I choose. Okay. So that's the big one, number one. The big one, number two, is do not multitask. Do not multitask, because it's hard. You think multitasking is being more efficient. It's not. Do one thing well with your full focus. You'll get it done faster with better results, meaning higher quality with less time. So let me just give you an example. If you're writing an email with your thumb on your smartphone while you're brushing your teeth and listening to a podcast and telling your kids to get in bed, which I've done all 4 of those things at once, it might feel efficient because you're doing all that at one time. But what's actually happening here? Well, one, you're not even hearing what the podcast is saying. So that's a wash. You might as well not be listening to it. 2, your email is probably not as thoughtful as it would have been as if you sat down at a computer to focus on it somewhere quiet. And it probably took you 4 times longer to type it with your thumb rather than using a real computer keyboard. You probably missed a few spots brushing your teeth, so you're going to need to go to the dentist later, which is going to cost you more time. And your kids are not getting your best attention and energy at home. That's what multitasking does. It's a lose, lose, lose situation. Or how about this one? We've all had this one. You wake up early to do your devos, but you're doing your devos on your phone with your Bible app. You're spending time with the Lord. You're reading his word, but you stop every few minutes to check your email, to check Instagram, to check Facebook, to check your text messages. And what happens? You spend an hour, but it's all broken up and fragmented, and you really get nothing out of it. Now, if you were really focused for that 30-minute window and you didn't look at your phone, maybe you would have had a really deep fellowship with the Lord. You would have got a lot out of his word. And because your attention wasn't split between 5 or 6 different things, maybe it only took 20 minutes of your time instead of an hour, but you get more out of it in less time. So better result in less time. That is the power of focusing on one thing at a time. Multitasking is an impossible way to do things fast or well. So stop trying. Let me give you a few tips about multitasking, and then we'll talk about a few other areas of destroying your distractions, and then we'll get into some Q&A. I think we're actually going over. I'm so sorry on the time. Well, let me do this. I'll put the notes I'll be able to email you guys the notes. I'll skip some multitasking tricks, but there's one app on your phone and your computer called Freedom that it is a paid app, but it's worth it because your time is your life. But that one can help you not multitask. Freedom. Check out Freedom. Okay. So here's a few other ideas about not multitasking, or other ways to destroy distractions. Delete social media. Delete social media. Do you really need to see what your friends ate for lunch? Probably not. I've been off of Facebook and Instagram for 7 years, and I haven't missed a single thing that has mattered. Okay. In fact, it makes me actually call my friends and find out how they're doing, right? Social media is a passive relationship, and friendships require active engagement. So if you can't delete your social media, at least just keep it on your computer only. Don't put it on your phone. That way you go check it when you're in front of your computer, instead of like checking it on your phone while you're waiting at the checkout line. You could have spent that time praying. You could have spent that time talking and being friendly to the cashier. So at least keep social media off of your phone. The second thing is to delete emails from your phone. You don't need to check your email on your phone. Most emails are not extremely time sensitive. Now, if you work in sales, okay, maybe you need to have it. But everyone else, like me, I don't need it on my phone. I can check it 3 times a day at on my computer. And that's the other thing about emails. Number 3 is to check at specific times throughout the day. Don't keep it open and just let it interrupt you all day. You have real work that you want to do. So just check your email like 3 or 4 times a day at specific times, deal with them in bulk, and move on. Number 4 is delete any unnecessary apps from your phone. Anything that's going to suck you in to like YouTube or news or even your browser. Okay. And the last thing is to use parental controls. Okay. By the way, if you think it's impossible to have a smartphone without a browser, I have a smartphone without a browser. Okay. You don't need it. You don't need it. You can navigate, you can add your calories, you can track your exercises. You don't need to have a browser on your smartphone. It's not that necessary. So try it. Just try it for a season and see if it helps you feel less distracted. Again, distractions keep you from the life that you actually want. And then the last thing is to use parental controls. This has been really helpful in my spiritual life. My wife has set up my phone so that my apps go to sleep at 9 p.m. This is in iPhone and Android, parental controls. You can make your phone go to sleep, or you can make the apps go to sleep. So 9 p.m. they go to sleep. They don't wake up until 7:32 the next morning. I can't check anything until 7:32. What does that allow me to do? It allows me to spend time with the Lord first, because we all know we would check our phones first because it's addictive. But if you force yourself to not be able to use your phone till 7:32, then you're like, okay, Lord, I'm going to spend time with you because I can't do anything else anyway. So I'm going to spend time with you, and it will really help you go to your Bible first and not your phone. So those are some tips for destroying your distractions. And the key is, the summary really is this, you guys, to be a good steward of the one precious life that God has given you, right? Use your life for his glory. Every second is a gift from God, and invest those seconds into actions that will result in God-honoring outcomes. Live your life with intentionality. Remember the finiteness of your time, and avoid squandering this one precious life that God gave you on distractions that will take you off of the mission that he's given you. Ask him for wisdom to manage your time well for his glory, and know that the only thing that will last is what you do for the Lord. There's a hymn. I'm going to end with this, okay? The days pass so swiftly, the months come and go. The years melt away like new fallen snow. Spring turns to summer, then summer to fall. Autumn brings winter, then death comes to all. And here it is. Only one life, so soon it will pass. Only what's done for Christ will last. Only what's done for Christ will last. Let's use our lives well. All right, I am over on our time. If you hate me, I ask for your forgiveness. If you want to hang out and ask questions about time management, now is the time. Please type your questions in the chat. We'll do our best to answer a few of them. Brandon, is there anything you want to add to anything I said while we wait for the questions?
No, I mean, honestly, just this is a ton of great info. I hope everybody was really blessed by this. Alex has been helping me personally in this area. This is one of those things that I have to really try to do. And a lot of the tips that he's given you are very helpful. I've actually integrated some of these things. I've started planning my week on Sundays. I found to get a lot more done. So I challenge you, really take advantage of all the tools that he's given you.
Somebody asked what if I could go back to the last slide, but I'll just tell you what it says. Only one life, so soon it will pass. Only one life, so soon it will pass. Only what's done for Christ will last. Okay? Yeah. All right. Any questions? Any questions about time management? Yes, this session is recorded, so you can review it again. It will be in the YouTube link that we send in our weekly email reminder. And next week, Pastor Jeff will be here, and Pastor Brandon and Pastor Jeff will be teaching on managing your finances, money. So come to that as well, and tell a friend, invite a friend. Any questions? If you are, we're going to do a few questions if you guys want to hang out with us. What if you are using social media to minister to others using Bible verses? That is not wrong. No, Diana, that is not wrong. Social media can be used. We use social media as a church to reach people. So this very, very good to use it that way. Just be aware, if all of your time is going to social media, there might be a problem. So any other questions, you guys? Questions?
I know we had one question earlier specifically about getting off of TV and how do you help your family to do that. If I could actually just share a little personal experience with this.
Yeah.
My wife and I actually just got rid of our TV flat out. Like, we had a PlayStation, we had a TV, and we just got rid of it. And we still have like Netflix and stuff like on our computer, but we find that we don't use it as often because we don't have this big all-consuming screen in our living room anymore. And so we find that, we'll watch like an episode or two here. And it's not to say that it doesn't happen where time just slips away and you keep watching episodes of something, but we've both noticed that it happens a lot less when there's not this huge tempting screen sitting in the middle of your living room. It's just not as convenient. It's not as alluring. So I would challenge you that if it's really a huge problem, and remember, we're talking about your spiritual health and well-being. If you feel that it's really become a distraction and it's really not healthy for your family, just get rid of it. Don't try to kind of manage it or, just try to be like, well, maybe we just won't do it on these days. I've tried all of those things. None of it ever worked. The best thing was just getting rid of it flat out. And we really don't regret it. It's kind of nice not having just a big black screen sitting in our living room anymore. And we can, instead, sometimes we fill that time with like reading books. I've been finding I read more books and stuff now because of it. So I would challenge you to just get rid of your entertainment altogether. And then, maybe keep Netflix or something on like a laptop if you have one or something like that. If you still want to watch a show every once in a while you're folding laundry or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so good. And I think that when you need to make a major change, you have to kind of go extreme at first and then maybe consider adding it back later once you've dealt with the issue. So yeah, screen time, there's settings on your iPhone for it that you can set screen limits. There's you can have a conversation with your family about it, and you can just be honest and be like, guys, we're spending too much time on our screen. It's not actually making anybody happy. We think it is, but it's not. So, I would say, like what Brandon said, be extreme if you have to, but make sure you explain to your family why you think this is important. So, yeah. Any other questions, or did you want to say something, Brandon?
No, I was just going to say, and just make sure that you and your spouse make that decision together. You don't want to just kind of steamroll, your other half in a sense. So make sure that's something that you decide together, because that could also create a huge friction point. That's not to say sometimes, a little friction actually is actually a good thing. Sometimes, when we feel that stress, that tension, that kind of means our flesh is being dealt with. So sometimes we need to just press on through that, but make sure that you're actually talking about this and you don't just make a huge change, kind of like Alex said, without having some kind of conversation about it. Because that's what worked for us, and that's what's worked for some other people, but that might not work well with your family. So
any other questions about anything we talked about tonight? We will give it 3 to 5 minute window, but we should be wrapping it up here soon. Any questions?
Yeah. So far, I'm not seeing anything. Seems like you must have done a good job covering all your bases because nobody has any questions.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. Well, if you do have questions, you can email me later. You can email me alexe at ccsouthbay.org, alexe at ccsouthbay.org. But next week, next Monday, come back, invite a friend. We're going to be talking about finances with Pastor Jeff and Pastor Brandon. So
Yes.
God bless you guys. Go be good stewards for the kingdom of God and use your life well. It's his gift to you. Use it well. And we'll see you at church.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah, we'll see you guys for the next class. And just so you guys know, the reason we're actually having Pastor Jeff here, he has actually managed several multi-million-dollar businesses. So it's not like we're just bringing in our senior pastor, but we're bringing in somebody who has very practical, real expenses managing large assets. So he'll have a lot to share with you. You'll be really blessed by a lot of the information that he brings. So hopefully you guys will be here, and I think you guys will be really blessed. So we love you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Alex, for sharing a lot of this great info and ministering to the class, to the people online. And we'll see you guys all next week. So see you Monday.